That sounds like the end of the ministry season side to me is what that is.
Yes. I think what it is that the rhythms of summer are just different than the fall and the spring. And so the rhythms of fall and spring are kind of that sustained weekly activities, whereas all of that winds down. But then the summer are these like short spurts of highly intensive activity like VBS and trips. And so you've got just as much planning and preparation going on, but it's kind of fits and starts rather than long sustained activity. So it's a good thing, but yeah,
it is a whole different.
It's a whole different rhythm, but it's still a rhythm.
Well, it's one of the things we've been talking about. I don't know if you've been following this like argument about whether teachers should take the day off tomorrow.
I just barely, minimally.
Well, and as somebody who's married to a school teacher,
right,
I can tell you the pay that they make is not. It's not fantastic.
Dismal.
It's dismal.
It's dismal. It's a reality.
And the amount of arguments that folks have about like, well, they get the whole summer off.
Right. No.
Which they don't like.
No.
And I thought that. Right. Before being married to a school teacher. But it's very similar in the idea like, no, the summer is really them like wrapping up the school year. And they're still working during the summer. Right. There's not like
I would also love to know any teacher that leaves their work at school when they leave at the end of the day. In my opinion, I taught public school for 4 years and realized I wasn't cut out for it. So there's that. But you are jamming, if you want a different way to look at it, fine. You want to say you're getting your summers off? Well, you're jamming 365 days into a 190 or 200 day calendar. So fine. That is their vacation.
Yeah. Well, it's just,
that's their PTO.
Well,
if you want to look at it that way.
He really can't take days off during the school year. Like,
right.
He really can't. That's the other thing.
Exactly.
Because you have to pay for the sub. If you don't, like if you do not have the hours, which they only earn one, right. I think it's only one PTO day a month.
Right.
That they get. And so if you want to take a week off during the school year, you have to wait until May. Right. Then you can't because that's when EOGs are. And it's just a very interesting rhythm. I think that's, it's what made me think of that. Because the church is sort of like that too. That there are seasons in the church year, and every season has a different rhythm to it, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And so because we don't have all this like programming in the summer, it feels like it's a down season, but for the church staff, it's actually really our busiest.
Right.
Because you got to get all of the stuff done.
Yep.
To plan for the next year in like the 3 months that are.
Exactly. Meanwhile, doing this kind of fits and starts of making sure that these short-term things that happen in the summer are pulled off well.
Yeah.
Which in theory, you are kind of doing that all year long, but it is it is a really important thing that I have come to realize in working in ministry. And probably so many other career paths as well, that you finally get to that point where you say, I need to not need anything to ever be finished. Because as soon as I believe, I'm finally done, we finished out, like we finished our last Wednesday night gathering for children and youth last night. But I am already thinking about the need for volunteers come fall because that will still be a need. It's temporarily on hiatus, but it will still be a need. So nothing ever fully ends.
Yeah.
Until you kind of sunset the whole ministry as a whole, which is okay. And that's actually a good thing. It's just, it requires a completely different mentality.
Yeah.
It's not project management where there's a finite beginning and end.
Yeah. And there's like a Gantt chart and you can check off like this is done. There are elements of that, but it's not, if you're doing it well, there's a lot of pre-planning and post. Like every week, there's a small snapshot in our staff meeting. We look back and we go, well, what did we do last week? What went well?
Right.
What can we do differently moving forward? Just as our own practice of recognizing that we're not perfect and nothing ever goes exactly the way we had hoped.
Ever.
which is beautiful and one of the things I love about ministry. But it does require us to look back a little bit and think about how can we adjust moving forward?
Right.
And so there's that kind of rhythm of review, I guess. But it's never like, hey, Advent's done.
Right.
We've done that.
It's always coming back.
Yeah. So speaking of things that are always coming back, we have a confession. Well, I have a confession to make, which is you did not get a podcast last week, and that is my fault.
It was a great conversation. I'm sorry you missed it.
We had a whole conversation around Deuteronomy 32. It was lovely. We had some deep insights. Both of us came away changed. And unfortunately, we're going to be changed, and you're just going to have to wait. Because we were like, there's no way, the nature of these conversations, for us to recreate what happened. Because we really are... we want to model, as part of this, our curiosity and how do you approach the Bible with curiosity instead of already assuming you know what it's going to tell you.
Right.
And so it's hard to recreate a curious journey authentically. We probably could have faked it, but you would have noticed. So we're going to pretend that you heard our lovely conversation about Deuteronomy. But since you didn't, let me catch you up on where we are in the story. So... the last podcast you heard was Exodus. They were just getting out of slavery, getting ready to enter into the desert. They just received the Ten Commandments. They started talking about what does living in the covenant look like. So Deuteronomy 32 is Moses' last words to his people. And what he reminds them is that your history is important.
Right.
Remember where God has been. Remember how God has brought you through all of these things. Which reminded me of one of my very favorite gospel songs of all time. It's called "He Never Failed Me Yet." Have you heard this song?
I don't think I have.
We're gonna hear it in worship.
Look at it.
And we're gonna play a little clip of it in worship on Sunday because it's fantastic. But the text of it is: Didn't God bring Moses? Didn't God bring freedom to Moses from Pharaoh? Didn't God rescue from the fiery furnace Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Didn't God show me through all the obstacles? Well, then God has never failed me. Never failed me and never failed me yet. Not going to fail me because never has, right? So that's a quick summary of Deuteronomy 32. And so to get us where we are today, which is 1 Samuel 8, we have a little bit of a quick history lesson to go through, which is that the Hebrew people who are now called the Israelites, they've changed their name as they entered into the Promised Land. And the book that we skipped a couple books in between Deuteronomy and 1 Samuel, Joshua, Judges, Ruth. Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel. Yeah. I always just sing the song. Joshua is the story of how the Hebrew people ended up in the Promised Land. Joshua is a whole fascinating topic, which could take up a whole another podcast on its own, except to say that it probably didn't happen exactly the way it's described in the Bible.
Or the song that is in my head of, Joshua.
The Battle of Jericho. Yeah.
The walls came tumbling down. That may be all I know of Joshua at the moment, and if I'm being totally honest.
And then there's Judges, which is once they settled in the land, they were very tribal. And so you stayed with your tribe. You were from the tribe of Judah or the tribe of Benjamin. They pretty much stayed to their own tribe. And the rules and structures were within their own tribes. And so they were ruled by people they called judges. Sort of a wise person.
Right.
Mayor, maybe, but not quite so political. More just like a wise...
Right, like a sage of sorts.
A sage, yes. And they would go to them for disputes of... if there was conflict and that kind of stuff. And then they had the Levites, who were the priestly class, who maintained the covenant with God. So they were the worship. So that was sort of the two strands. Was you had the priests who were maintaining worship fidelity, and then you had the judges who were maintaining like community life.
Okay, so like religious and civil leadership.
Yes. And so now at the end of Judges, we get a very famous line, which is that the people asked for a king. They lived all the way through, Samson. They had Deborah and all their things. And then the last line of Judges is, in those days, there was no king in Israel. Each person did what they thought was right.
Interesting.
Isn't that interesting? So do we see any potential pitfalls for organizing your society that way?
Yeah, because you have humans involved. I'm sorry. We talk about the joke that church would be great if it weren't for all the humans inside of it. And I feel like that's kind of applicable to almost anything of what they consider. I mean, if I think about it in modern standards, how horrible would it be if we just had this renegade culture of we all behaved the way we think is best?
There's always, I think every teenage boy especially goes through this anarchist phase where they're like, what if we just everybody just did what they thought was right. And we don't need anybody to tell us what to do and all that stuff. And it turns out we really do.
There is a collective conscience, I believe, but I think we stifle it so much that it's not going to actually do anything for us right now.
And sin will always have its...
There we go.
Always have its way. And so there's a little bit of... This tribal thing works when the tribes are relatively small.
Right.
But if you've ever, every development of civilization history class I've ever taken has talked about this transition where the civilization has found itself needing to reorganize because the political structure that they're in is not working anymore because they've grown too big, or the needs of the problems of the day are not the same as the problems that it was when you set it up. But this is entirely hey, we're now really too big for every tribe to decide what to do because we're running into each other, right? When we're living in the same area, and we still are connected to one another. And so that's sort of where we find ourselves today in chapter 8 is the end of Saul. So, Samuel. The end of Samuel, who was really the last prophet, the last judge, I guess, the last figure who had this position of status. And he was the last leader of Israel to serve as the judge. And he was sort of a traveling judge. So he would go from town to town and just settle disputes as he went.
Gotcha.
And so now we're in chapter 8 where Samuel is about to die and they have to figure out what's next. So if you want to read the first 6 verses.
Okay. Now, when Samuel got old, he appointed his sons to serve as Israel's judges. The name of his oldest was Joel. The name of his second was Abijah?
Sure.
Abijah. They served as judges in Beersheba, but Samuel's sons didn't follow in his footsteps. They tried to turn a profit, they accepted bribes, and they perverted justice. And here's the human element. So all the Israelite elders got together and went to Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, "Listen, you are old now, and your sons don't follow in your footsteps. So appoint us a king to judge us like all the other nations have." It seemed very bad to Samuel when they said, "Give us a king to judge us." So he prayed to the Lord.
Okay. What has happened so far in our story?
Well, people are being people-y, right?
Right.
Isn't it funny? I would love to know what Samuel thought. Samuel, it's I don't know how to put it, but it's the straight-laced guy, and then his kids are not.
Yeah, exactly.
You gotta wonder how he feels. He's like, man, thought I did this right. But,
oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Let's talk about that parental judgment. You know how many times I've had conversations with older parents, people who are grandparent age now parents.
Right.
And their kids take some other path in life.
Yep.
And they're always second guessing themselves. Well, what did I do to come?
Right.
And it's they're just individual people. They're just people.
Right.
Yeah. It's nothing necessarily you did right or wrong. It's just.
And the sphere of influence changes, and all of a sudden Samuel's sons recognized what privilege came with the power that they were given clearly, and they were like, let's capitalize on this. Let's capitalize on this power.
Well, and they grew up in a whole different scenario, right? Samuel was brought up from nothing. These cats were brought up in that position of well, I know this is what's coming next, and I wonder how that shapes to shape your brain
when you've been raised with the entitlement already there.
Yeah. Yeah. So what they do with their position of power is corruption.
Yeah. Interesting. Not surprising. But interesting. So, and the immediate response to that is, no, you need to give us somebody who will actually do things for us. Yeah. Or, I don't know, it's funny to me that their response is, give us a king.
Right.
Rather than, how do you know the king isn't going to be equally corrupt? I guess I get, but I don't get that this is I'm about to sneeze. Sorry, friend. Excuse me. It's still allergy season. Can you tell? The immediate request is for a king, but also it seems so obvious because it's that's what everybody else has.
That's what everybody else has, right?
So we need to have what they have, and that'll make it funny.
Yeah, and it's sort of the ignorance of distance, where you're not in those other countries, and so you can't really see what's happening. Right. They don't have. one of the myths about the ancient world is that everybody stayed in their hometown and nobody ever traveled.
Right.
Which archaeology has proven to be wrong over and over again, because you find bits and pieces from places they shouldn't be.
Right.
So people knew what was happening around them. Everybody else in the ancient Near East has a king at this point. And so they go, well, we know how we can fix our problems.
Yeah.
Let's be more like those people.
Right. They didn't even have social media, and yet it's still keeping up with the Joneses, and the grass is greener over there. Like, there we go.
Yeah, it's not
more of the same.
We are people are the same. There's nothing new under the sun.
That's right.
And so that's what they're sort of looking at. They're like, well, everybody else has a king, and they seem to be doing okay.
You know, it's funny. So there's a little note in my study Bible that says the desire for a king was not necessarily offensive to God. Considering how some of the judges behaved, it was a little surprised that the people would want to replace blah, blah, blah. The thing that angered God was the way the people phrased their request and the reason they gave. Give us a king so we can be like the other nations.
Yep.
That's the funny part.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. We want to be like them. So.
Yeah. Wouldn't we be better if we were just like them? Yeah.
Right.
Isn't that fallacy that we live in with our whole lives?
100%.
If I wore the same pants as that influencer.
That's right. If only.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's got to be the pants that make it. It's 100%.
Yep.
And they sell things to that. I mean, that's the whole basis of marketing. It's like they have young, attractive people in beer commercials because everybody thinks if they drink Budweiser or whatever it was, we're going to look like those people. And we're going to have a life like them.
Yep.
And it turns out that most of us don't. We drink beer while watching football on our couch on Saturday.
There we go.
It's not. That's not reality.
Right. And yet there's something mildly comforting about how ancient this desire is. I don't know if that's odd to say, but it's like, oh, okay, that is the nature of this version of sin, is it not?
Like, I really like that idea. Like, we tend to think that everything is new.
Right.
Every day we're like, oh, this is all new. This is all new. None of this is new. Not a thing is new. It's all just another version.
That's right. The presentation might look different, but
it's a different tool.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I talk about with like the difference between a bulletin and a screen. It's just it's a different tool.
Right.
It's the exact same information.
That's right.
It's just a different tool.
And we are still worshiping God.
Yeah. Exactly. And this tool happens to save us several $100s a year.
There we go. No. Right.
So that's where we are. Give us a king. But Samuel was like, So what do you think Samuel's concern is? Because it says Samuel thinks
it's bad.
It's bad.
Well, I mean, I would guess that his concern is this going to anger God? Because he immediately goes to pray.
Oh, right.
This seemed very bad to Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. I guess his concern is that they're going to usurp God with said king?
Well,
perhaps?
I wonder if it's something, part of the concern is kings often start to claim divine right over time. Like either they become godlike,
right,
like Pharaoh was a god,
right, or
claimed he was a god,
right,
or they start claiming divine right, and I'm wondering if there's some concern about the downstream effects of that. Right. I wonder if it's not just to him seeing like, hey, this system's not really working now. Like, there's a lot of corruption in this decentralized system. Right. What's going to happen when we centralize everything in the power of one person?
Right.
And what,
you're just going to get, you're going to get a different version of the same thing.
Yeah.
Maybe his wisdom is in there.
Yeah. So
I don't think you know what you're asking for.
The Lord answered Samuel, comply with the people's request, everything they ask of you, because they haven't rejected you. No, they've rejected me as king over them. They are doing to you only what they've been doing to me from the day I brought them out of Egypt to this very minute, abandoning me and worshiping other gods. So comply with their requests, but give them a clear warning, telling them how the king will rule over them and operate. Then Samuel explained everything the Lord had said to the people who were asking for a king. I love salty God.
It's like, do it. It's almost like this is a great parent moment. Like, this is a great God as parent moment.
Yeah.
Of natural consequences, my friends. Like, okay. But I'm going to let you know ahead of time. Like, this is the choice you were making.
Yep.
Here is how I see this playing out. Now you choose. And the silly children will be like, yeah, no, we still want it. And God is like, okay. But you're gonna lay in that bed that you just made.
I think some of it is like the wrathful. We talk so negatively about the God of wrath in the Old Testament.
Right.
And I don't love the idea of God like going scorched earth on people and like decimating villages and things, which mostly comes in Joshua. We'll talk about Joshua at some point.
There we go.
But I think what always stands out to me every time I read Salty God in the Old Testament is like God has every reason to be pissed. God has every reason to be angry. Like, I think I've always disconnected the idea of God's wrath from the people deserving it, right? Because, I want to talk about grace and all that, and I believe in grace, and I do, and that there's redemption for everyone, but, like, it has to make God upset and angry when we are openly defiant.
Right.
Like...
Well, and it's funny that, like, I don't even know... See, and it's... Now I can see it as like the salty God, but I sit here, I'm thinking about it from like the most stoic, just steady parent, like, this is how this has happened. Like, it is that there is grace, but grace can only, in my brain, sometimes, grace can only be noticed when the consequence is there. Like, there are certain moments in which consequence is necessary for growth. Right? And I feel like this is one of those moments where God is like, every single time I have extended this is what's happened. So this is where we have to go next. Like,
I love that idea of, I think sometimes we hear grace and we think it's a get out of jail free card.
Right.
It means nothing bad will ever happen.
That's right.
And we'll never have to experience any consequences for our decisions making or our choices. I think we get that mixed up in predestination too, that the idea that because God has a plan or a route, that means that we don't have any choices along the way.
Right.
And I very much think that that's not true.
Right. Right. It's not the Santa Claus God that's going to give you whatever you want and make sure that it turns out okay. That, to me, and this is things that I have struggled with and want to adopt, and I can say them and then living them are two different things. We know that. But this idea that, like, grace comes with consequence. And sometimes, the most gracious thing to do is to allow that consequence to play out, because how else are you going to grow? Yeah. How else are you going to internalize? It's like for children, you never allow your children to be unsafe, but you do allow them to make choices that how else are you going to internalize the understanding of that thing, because I can forbid you from doing it. I can stop you in your tracks on X, Y, or Z things, but that's not you learning how to live your life in a different way. Mm-hmm. That is me stopping you from that growth. So I don't know. I put God in that space here of, you're going to have to understand me from a different angle. And that means the consequence of your choice.
Well, I have, my 4-year-old is covered right now in bruises and scrapes, and both of his knees have big, scabs on them. Of course,
like about summertime when it's short sweater, the knees are exposed and everything goes to pot. Yep.
Yeah, and because he's the youngest, he naturally wants to play with his older siblings, but they're playing at a level he's not quite physically able to do. But kids don't really understand their age. Like, they are...
They are as old as anyone in the room. That's right. My two have always been that way too. Yeah.
No, they really do. Like, they don't have... We as adults put all this weight on age, but like kids don't see... They really don't see that at all. They see themselves as equal to everyone else. And so he doesn't understand... that he can't run as fast or whatever. And so he's falling down and hitting his knees. And those are just part of growing up. Yeah. And part of life. And I don't know when you started ministry, but when I started youth ministry, was ripe in the helicopter parent phase, where we were struggling to get parents to allow us to do anything that had any risk in it at all. Like, going on hikes was sketchy in some ways. Corn mazes. I got in so much trouble one time because we went to a corn maze And I divided the kids up into groups and said, have fun. I'll meet you at the end of the corn maze.
Right.
Because the point was for them to
figure it out.
out.
And you can't necessarily get you get lost inside, but you can't get lost.
You can't get lost.
In the world.
Yeah. You're not. If you get lost in the maze, we'll send in somebody after you. But you're going to find your way out eventually.
Right.
Somehow you're getting out of the maze.
Yep.
And one of the parents was like, I cannot believe you let these kids go in this corn maze by themselves. And I was like, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
And so I found a book very early on in ministry that was something like, I can't remember, it was like The Blessing of Broken Bones.
Oh, The Blessing of a Skinned Knee.
That's what it is, yes.
Yeah. There's like a 3-part of it. The Blessing of a B-, I think, is another one.
I didn't know about that one. That's good.
I might have it on my shelf.
I like that.
Yeah, it's for like the older kids, like The Blessing of a Skinned Knee. Yes. Such a good book.
And I very fundamentally believe that. Grace doesn't mean freedom from experiencing a skinned knee. You need to have that, because that's how we grow.
Right.
And yes, God is a little salty about this.
Right. I do like salty God, I'm gonna say.
But it's very much any parent's appropriate parent reaction.
Right.
Well,
right.
You've never listened to me before. Like, that's what I think strikes me is it's like, well, I brought them out of Egypt, and about 10 seconds later, they were like, what have you done for me?
This either.
Yeah. What have you done for me lately, God?
Right.
And so it's not like it was unexpected.
Right.
I think.
Right. And it's got to be, there's so much rich truth in all of this that if we just sat, I cannot even begin to count the number of times where in growing up, the most important growth moments and breaking open moments I had for myself, which opened me to other people's experiences later, were the ones where I had to fumble and falter on my own. Mm-hmm. And I think about, like, my parents never hung me out to dry. My parents never left me dangling and without, like, quote unquote, a safety net. But they sure as heck let me make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
And feel the weight of those mistakes and those consequences. Mm-hmm. And I do believe I am better off for that.
Yeah, but you always had a safety net.
I had a safety net.
And these people, the Israelites, always will have the God's safety net. Exactly. God's never going to abandon them to the point of destruction.
Right.
Because that's the promise God makes in the rainbow, right? I'm never going to allow...
We're going to do this again.
Exactly. Complete destruction of the earth. But God is like, well, okay.
Right.
It's the ultimate, I told you so, like... As a parent, every once in a while I'll tell my kids, like, well, you can make that choice, but this is what's going to happen. Right. And I always wish that I had written it down and, like, dated it and be like, this is what I told you would happen.
Yep.
And then they go somewhere that they come home and, like, the exact thing that you said. And I always wish I had, like, the sticky note to pull out and be like...
Right. But at the same time, they had to learn that for themselves, did they not? Because it never would have absorbed had it just been your wisdom... at them,
It strikes me how much of parenting is just like telling them what's going to happen and then watching while they don't believe you.
It happen.
And then watching it happen.
So. And recognizing that, now I get it. Like, I really kind of hate some of those moments of now I get it.
Yeah.
Lord, now I understand why my mother said those words to me so many times growing up. And I hated it every time. But here I am.
You would just save yourself so much pain and anguish and heartache if you just listened to me the first time.
Right. But clearly you needed to experience that pain and anguish and heartache because you didn't listen. But then, it strikes me for folks who have maybe turned away from faith or turned away from the concept of God because of this vengeful, wrathful concept of God in the Old Testament. But I think maybe that's what I love about this particular series, because I am having to learn things that I never, because we don't focus on this piece and because we have watered down in a lot of ways, we only want the God that suits us for this moment, and we only want the God of Jesus when we want baby Jesus. We don't want bloody Jesus. I can see why a lot of people can't reconcile this concept of God, because the concept of God that they have is this exceedingly controversial human one. Mm-hmm. It is not actually God. Mm-hmm. It is a whole bunch of stories about God that don't actually align with with who God truly is.
Well, and I think you can acknowledge God's anger in the Old Testament without going to that God is vengeful.
Right.
Because I don't think...
True.
I don't think God ever gets to the point of lashing out in anger.
Well, and it's like, this is a classic example. If God was a Zeus-style God, when the people came and said, we want a king, he'd be like, well, I'll show you, zap, zap. And yet again, would there have been another flood? Yeah, probably. Like, a vengeful God would retaliate. We're not seeing retaliation. We're seeing allowing the consequences to play themselves out, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened throughout the whole entire, and I hadn't thought of it that way, but there's never a point after the flood when when God promises never to do that again. Yeah. You could say that was vengeful. I don't know that it even was vengeful. I think it was more like God, like, well, this was a mistake. Let me just wipe it out and start over.
Right.
There's never a point where anything that the Israelites experienced was something that they didn't bring on themselves. Mm-hmm. That could have been prevented if they had done what they had promised to do in Exodus 20 when the Ten Commandments were given.
Right.
If they had just followed through.
And if you think, it really, it reconciles itself so nicely in my brain of all of the metaphors that are used to explain God. Mm-hmm. The Good Shepherd, the parent, all of it. It's like, that is what a good shepherd or a good parent would do, is never leave. There's never an abandonment. There's never retribution, but there is always leaving open the opportunity for the consequence of your actions to play out.
Yeah. I told my kids the other day, I was like, do you enjoy being yelled at? Like, is this enjoyable for you? And they were like, no, not really. And I was like,
not for me either.
Your dad and I would never, we're not yellers. We would never yell at you.
Right.
If you just did what you were asked to do.
Right.
If you just did, we have some routines in our house. They're expected to do their chores when they get home from school, which are not that hard. It's not like we're like...
Right. You're not feeding the hogs.
Right, exactly.
Tilling the field.
Clean your own room up.
There we go.
One takes the recycling out, one takes the trash out. Like that. Yep. That's about the extent of their... and it's like every day we have to fight them to do this. And I'm like, this is why you get yelled at. Because there are expectations that were set up. They've been the same expectations since you started school.
That's right.
We've done
Nothing
the same
is surprising
thing. Nothing has changed. Yeah. And that's where God is, I think, in the story. It's like, listen, when I brought you out of Egypt, I gave you some clear expectations.
That's right.
These are the things that you were asked to do. And you have continually chosen not to do these things.
Yep.
I don't know why you're surprised that this is happening. Like, why is this shocking to you?
Yes. I love this reorienting of who God is in the Old Testament, because you're vengeful, angry, the sinner's in the hands of an angry God. Mm-hmm. Like it doesn't really hold water if you think, if you shift what you're seeing God as being. This is it's just what it is.
How much of our American theology is shaped by the Puritans?
I was just about to say the Puritanistic approach to God. Yeah. Because God needed to be angry for them to
Sinners in the hands of an angry God is such a why we still remember that sermon.
Yeah. Why we still study it in school
250 years later. I mean, it is a very well written piece of oratory.
As a literary document.
It's very well written. But with all apologies to Jonathan Edwards and our Presbyterian forebears, completely not an accurate reflection of who God is in this story, right? So stay tuned for another podcast, Deconstructing Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God.
That could be a fun one. I gotta go back and read. I taught it once, but a long time ago, but I'm gonna have to.
I had a friend who preached it one time.
Wow.
I was like, wow.
Gonna need to know why.
Interesting choice. Yeah. Anyway, so that's where we find ourselves. Is God is justifiably.
Yes.
I think
frustrated.
Frustrated is the good word here, and all right, fine. You're gonna do what you want to do anyway.
That's right. So go ahead.
Let's stop fighting. Let's do 11 through 17.
All right. Find 11. Here we go. This is how the king will rule over you, Samuel said. He will take your sons and will use them for his chariots and his cavalry and as runners for his chariot. He will use them as his commanders of troops of 1,000 and troops of 50, or to do his plowing and his harvesting, or to make his weapons or parts of his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers, cooks, or bakers. He will take your best fields, vineyards, and olive groves and give them to his servants. He will give 1/10 of your grain and your vineyards to his officials and servants. He will take your male and female servants along with the best of your cattle and donkeys and make them do his work. He will take 1/10 of your flock, and then you yourselves will become his slaves. One more, sorry. And when that day comes, you will cry out because of the king you chose for yourselves. But on that day, the Lord won't answer you.
Yeah. It's like, lose my number.
Right? New phone, who did?
Yeah.
Yep.
It
is the writing down, here's how it's going to play out. I'm going to sit this over here, and when you come back, I'm going to pull it out, and remember what we talked about? Classic parent moment.
I mean, it is fundamentally true. Mm-hmm. What he's saying here. This is how kings work. Mm-hmm. This is every kingdom, every dictatorship, every despot situation where there's one ruler, absolute ruler. This is what happens. Takes the best of everything off the top and leaves you with whatever's left. Right. So it's objectively true. And it's not like they could have seen that happening in other countries around them. I think it just goes to speak to what happens, I think, when we have decided what we want without taking into consideration all the downstream effects of it.
It goes back to the whole oversimplification, right? Mm-hmm. When we don't recognize that there's complexities to all of this that we couldn't possibly come up with, and so we oversimplify because we need an answer right now.
Yeah,
we need this solved right immediately.
Yeah,
and
we're scared.
Yep.
There's the Philistines are right over there. They're about to come and attack us. We need,
and they're huge.
And they're huge.
At least one of them is giant.
Literally huge. Yeah, physically giant. It's so interesting to me. They are doing archaeological digs in the areas of where this story takes place, and I don't think that they found any evidence of like a giant race of like people. So anyway,
did they find Goliath and a
wouldn't it be fascinating?
slingshot?
Here is Goliath.
Wow.
But I mean, maybe they were like relative. It's all relative, I
guess. Right.
But either way, there's a threat across the way. So there's a very real political crisis happening. Mm-hmm. There's a very real economic situation developing because as the tribes start to melt together, they're not sustainable as individual tribes anymore. They now have to work with other people. Right. So there creates an economic crisis. There's probably societal pressure now because once you get established, they start to get classes, and as soon as classes start happening, there's going to be class dissension between each other, and so it very much mirrors like every political moment, every national moment when the people in an area find themselves in a moment of change and distress, and they don't know what's going to happen next.
Right. So we tend to, so there's this like, what's the trend toward, well, let's get the one person, if we get this one guy, he'll fix it all. And I can say guy because historically, right? It's always been a dude.
Yeah.
He will fix it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we go to the strongman theory, this idea, well, if we just have one strong person who can do all of these things and fix everything for us. It's like a little bit like a daddy complex or a dad figure. I think I read that somewhere. It's like in times of peace, we want a mom as the president, and in times of stress and turmoil, we want a dad to be president.
It's like David Lamont has his World Changing 101 book, and his whole theory behind that is the superhero myth. being that we want this superhero, the one person who's going to come in and change everything. But the only thing that actually changes things for the better are movements of many doing little things.
Yeah.
But this is a classic example of, no, we just need the superhero. Because the superhero comes in and solves the problems. Yeah. The superhero in this story is going to be this king. This king is going to come in and do it all.
And it's, to me, it's an abdication of responsibility. Is really what it is. It's saying, this situation is too big for me.
Right.
I can't solve this. I don't know how to fix this.
Right.
It's not really my job anyway.
Right.
I'm just a teacher. I'm just a cook. I'm just a retired person. Like, I can't fix all of this stuff. And so I'm not I want to shift all of the responsibility for this problem onto some sort of person who's going to be wise and strong and great and be able to solve it for me.
Right. And I get the appeal. I absolutely get the appeal. I felt that. This feels like too much. I don't want to own navigating this particular whatever, fill in the blank.
Well, and I think that it's true across the spectrum. I don't think that that's. We have a tendency to sit in our little political stance and point at the other people and be like, "Well, they're the ones who are doing this."
Right.
I don't think that's true. I think that if you look at the history of the world, really, it's the natural tendency of everybody to be like, well, I didn't like this guy.
Yep.
So in response to me not liking this guy, we got to find somebody else who can. Now there's a new guy to fix it.
Right.
And we just keep vacillating between these people who are supposed to fix it for us.
Right. But yet we don't seem to do the legwork of recognizing, like my husband said the other day, I don't even remember what we were talking. It was something political, and he's always so good about kind of maintaining a curious but neutral stance around any fiery political story that comes along. Of course, I am awesome for clickbaiters. Like, you give me a buzzword and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I feel all the feelings before I have any facts. So, but he is the opposite, and he made some kind of comment about how, well, we all have blood on our hands around this. And his comment was because not that he acted on anything, because he doesn't, but that his initial thought around this, whatever it was a pointing finger thought, that he owned that the blood of the quote unquote proverbial blood of the circumstance was on his hands as much as anybody else's. And I'm like, that's a really wonderful and really difficult way to live.
Well, I think that absolutely, and it's so hard to recognize our complicity in things. And to own that we all have responsibility.
Yes.
You may not be able to, you don't directly have any impact on something that's happening in another part of the country. Like, you don't, like, your day-to-day decisions probably are not impacting what somebody does in Texas or Oklahoma or whatever. But there are people just like that. I mean, I think that's what always, remembering that these people in Samuel's time are the same as the people in our time also reminds me that the people around me are the same as the people over there.
Right.
And just because I can't do anything about that person in Oklahoma, there's somebody just like that sitting next to me in my area, and I am responsible for my interaction
and my
with
broad
that person.
brushstroke assumptions are the things that are making my hands dirty.
Yeah.
And I think that's historically where we've gone wrong just forever, is that I would imagine, this tribal mentality, and when it starts to break down, it's the beginnings of the I have begun to assume of you what I noticed over here. And so I've painted you with that brush, and that's the beginning of the problem.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I also think, when God brought them out of Egypt, it was a radically different kind of people. And God could have brought them out of Egypt and assigned Moses as king and set up a kingdom and done all these things at the beginning if that had been what God had intended for them to become.
Right.
But God chose a different path intentionally.
Right.
And it reminds me of the early church where Jesus, the early church sets it up intentionally to be countercultural, intentionally to make decisions that are different than what everybody else around them is doing. And I think what part of God's heartbreak here is what they're losing. Because there's an incredible amount of loss in transitioning into this kind of... Because this list is things you're going to lose. Like, these are things you could have had. These are the things you have right now. All you had to do was live by the covenant that you promised that you would. And that your ancestors said that they would abide by and failed at in the beginning. If we all agreed to live by these promises to one another, we wouldn't have a need for anyone to be ruling over us. Like anarchy and utopia and all of those things where there's no leader is a great vision, but it requires us all to live by the things that we say we're going to do. And there's so much loss in this idea of, well, somebody's, I don't have, when you remove personal responsibility from the situation and give it then to somebody else who's supposed to do it for you, you lose the stress of managing the responsibility, but you also lose all of the freedom of not having that person over you.
There was a quote, and now I can't remember it, and it's going to make me sad because it was such a good quote about the responsibility of freedom. That the recognition that freedom has a pretty deep level of responsibility to it. That we think of freedom as this, it's not carte blanche, it's not wide open, it's not whatever, but there's a huge amount of responsibility that allows for, and what we have here is the interest in not being responsible is removing your freedoms and other people's freedoms from them, and recognizing that my freedom comes at a cost to someone else is an important. I think that's what it is that God is lamenting, is your freedom of responsibility is coming at a cost of some other level of freedom, and freedom to multiple other people. Like everything, we don't want to live in a transactional world, but we set up our systems for everything to be cost, benefit, and deficit, right? I mean, everything is going to come at a cost.
So you can have this thing that you want.
That's right.
But it's going to cost you.
In exchange for.
Right. And by the way, you still have personal responsibility in the end.
Right.
It's not like you ever get rid of that. You can.
God's system shares that responsibility when everybody owns it and recognizes it. What we're asking for is pretending that we don't have the responsibility, giving it all to somebody else, but then really, at the end of the day, we still have responsibilities, but we've given somebody else a huge amount of power. That's going to be exploited.
Well, and I noticed that God's expectations for them don't change. And nowhere in this does God say, yeah, you can have a king, and by the way, you're not bound by the 10 Commandments anymore. It doesn't.
That's right.
I think one of the things that breaks my heart now is both everything seems transactional, and that we think that any end to get to the mean to get to the end that we want is okay. And again, that is not any one particular group. I see it throughout society.
It is humanity in a nutshell.
And that's what this is. It's like, well, we just want to get to the end of having a king so we can be like everybody else. And having somebody to protect us and we can feel safe. And it doesn't matter what we lose in the process or how we ended up getting there. And I think what God continues to remind us of is, no, the process is what matters. It's not the end.
It's the journey.
The journey is what matters. And
because you never get to the end. It's kind of like what we talked about with church work. Do you ever really get to an end? Because the end is going to launch the next piece, correct? I mean, like, is there ever an end outside of,
Well, the subtitle of our series is The Arrival Fallacy. The idea that you're ever going to get somewhere and then be done. Like, I have now arrived. And I am done.
I'm finished.
And
I believe that is what we call, death. And
That's it. When you die, that's it.
Die,
then you're done.
You're done.
But until then, you have...
And God takes you anyway, despite the...
My 95-year-old grandmother called me yesterday so I could help her with her cell phone. Right? Like, there is no point that we arrive at that is pure and perfect and everything is set up exactly the way we want it. And so the idea that there ever is an end, I love that idea. Like, there ever is the end. You're never getting where you think you're going.
Right.
The best we can get is good enough.
And I wonder if that is a secret that so many, like I think about Nelson Mandela, I think about Mother Teresa, who lived in experiences that I cannot imagine mentally sustaining through. And it just hit me, and I'm like, I wonder if that is one of the secrets of I'm not doing this to gain an end result. That the way I can sustain in any moment that feels too big or too overwhelming or experience the level of whatever you want, discontent, poverty, awfulness, I don't have a better word for it, that folks have experienced but yet maintained that like faithful continuation of their journey. Is it because they chose to not shoot towards an end? It's nope, it is just now. Yeah. I am present now. Now is what matters. And what's next will be what matters then. And, I don't... Yeah. Maybe that's Pollyanna and naive. And not saying that you don't look to the future, but you don't make the future your only focus. Yeah. Right?
I think that's one of the things about that I struggle with folks who are so heaven-minded. Like, the point of life is to get to heaven.
Right. Right.
And I think you lose out
Absolutely.
So many of the blessings of this life and this life has purpose too.
And quite frankly, if we're gonna say it, I'm gonna say it. If you are heaven focused, then you are transacting with God, are you not? Like, isn't that a transactional relationship? Because at the end of the day, if that is your goal, then you are seeking to receive something like that. Yeah. There's a transactional nature to that.
There is. It's like I pay you.
Right.
If I pay you in my good deeds, then I get to earn heaven.
Correct.
And I think that's one of the things, the Presbyterian claim of God has your salvation already taken care of, is an offer of freedom. Right. Not from responsibility, but to responsibility. Yes. Because it says, well, no, like heaven's not the point. Getting into heaven is not the point of this. The point of this is what you do in your life with other people.
And the motivation becomes very, very different. Your motivation isn't fear or I don't even know what other word I want to use. But your motivation becomes gratitude. And when your motivation is gratitude, it makes it a lot easier to not see the responsibility as a burden. Yeah. But to see the responsibility as just part of what you do. Yeah. Like, people talk about, when I show up for someone and they're surprised by it, or, but my response is, but that's what we do for each other. Like, I really want to believe and I want to live that, you know what? No one should be ashamed or afraid to say, oh my gosh, you know what? You told me to tell you when I needed something. I really need a burger and I don't want to leave my house. You say it to me, like, that is what we do. Yeah. That is living in the gratitude of knowing that we are interconnected. And I think that's what God is asking of us. Rather than it being a means to an end to get me somewhere better at the end of the day. Yeah.
One of the prouder parent moments I've had recently, I don't know if I told you about this or not, but one of my kids was playing on the playground with a friend. And the friend mentioned that he wasn't going to be able to come to school on Friday because he didn't have a ride. Yep. His mom had to go to work early and wasn't going to be able to take him. And Friday was a field trip to the North Carolina museum, the Natural Museum. Yep. And so it was like a big deal to miss. It wasn't just like a day of school. It was like a big deal to miss this day of school. And so my son gave him my phone number and said, my mom will pick you up. Yep. And bless him. Yeah. And I'm not going to lie. My first response was, I don't want to do that. Right. No, why did you do that? Right. Awesome. Yeah. She called me the next day and I was at the gym, so I didn't answer because I was dying. But, and I called her back and we had this conversation and she had found somebody else to help her in the meantime. And I said, we're happy to help. Right. She was going on about how she's a single mom, she didn't have family in the area, and sometimes, and she didn't want to ask her neighbor for help because she was worried her neighbor was going to ask her to babysit her kid. Like, this whole cycle of help. Yeah. And I was like, and all I said was, I am happy to help whenever you need it.
Yep.
You have my number. And I meant that. Yeah. And I doubt she'll ever call.
Right.
But for me, the fact that my son got it.
Yeah.
Like, that's the point. That's the point. That's the point. That's why we're here.
That's right. Amen.
There was no
hesitation for him.
No hesitation. Didn't even think about it.
And it wasn't transactional about what could this kid do for me later. It was, I hear someone has a need. Yeah. And guess what? I know we can fill it. Yeah. Look at that.
And there's no expectation ever.
That's right.
That person's going to pay me back.
Yes.
And it was just a general act of love and kindness. And wouldn't that be great?
Wouldn't it be great if we could live our lives that way?
Yeah.
And that is one thing that I see my husband, that is one thing that we've taught our kids with. We went through a long period of noticing folks with signs on corners, and my kids were very attuned to the fact that this person was asking for money. Well, we have money. Mm-hmm. Why don't we give them money? And we had a big, long conversation about, and my husband has said this to me before. I got duped about 13 years ago, and I thought I was savvy enough to never get duped.
Yeah.
Lock, stock, and barrel got scammed by a woman. I bought her groceries. We had an 1.5 hour long conversation. I went and withdrew cash to give her money because she convinced me that her son needed a prescription that she couldn't afford. And I am savvy enough. I have worked with all kinds of people, and I knew better. Mm-hmm. And yet, here I was. And my sweet husband, at the end of that interaction, because I was in tears apologizing for the fact that I had given away over $100. I had bought her $50 of groceries, and she didn't need any, blah, 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 blah. And his response to me was, you gave her a gift. It's not, we do these things without the expectation of anything else. And if you can live your life doing that, then you don't apologize for deciding to be kind in a moment, even if the other person ended up terribly transactional about all of it, and so it's if you're going to give money to someone that is holding a sign, you don't ask what it's for. You don't create any assumptions around who they are, what they're going to do, because we're good at that. We are excellent at judging. If you're going to give someone something, you give it as a gift. Yeah. And gifts come without strings attached.
Yeah. And I think that's part of what breaks God's heart. It's how transactional we've always been with God. Yeah. And how much of our relationship with God has really been centered around what can God do for me?
Right. That's right.
And God here is saying, you don't even know what's good for you.
Right.
You have no idea what the right thing is for you. Why wouldn't you trust me?
Right.
I've always had your best interest at heart. And how poor we are at judging what is the right thing to do, quote unquote, the right thing to do.
Right.
Because we don't have God's vision. We can't see 3 days down the road what this woman's going to do with these groceries, right? We have no way of knowing that, and we can only judge with the eyes that we have.
That's right.
And give ourselves permission to act with grace. I think I told somebody that one time. It's like, I could be wrong about all this.
Yeah.
Right? I could get to wherever and and at the end of life, God looks at me and says, well, you shouldn't have. Right. You should have preached more about sin, and you should have made people feel bad about themselves and convert, and you should have done all these things.
Right.
And I think what I always said was well, I'm going to err on the side of love and grace, because that's what I see Jesus doing.
Right. Right.
And I'm going to trust God to sort it out.
That's right.
And that's not my job.
That's right.
But the end of this chapter does remind us of this. But the people refused to listen to Samuel and said, no, there must be a king, so we can be like all the other nations. Our king will judge us and lead us and fight our battles. Why is that a good thing? Anyway. Samuel listened to everything the people said and repeated it directly to God. Then God said to Samuel, comply with their request and give them a king. Samuel then told the Israelite people, go back to your hometown.
God, I can only imagine.
Yeah, it's just a summation of everything I think we've talked about.
The human condition.
Yeah. Yeah. Samuel tells them what's going to happen to them, and every child in the world, they put both fingers in their ears and
And what you want to bet, if we continued reading, there would be some big upheaval of, oh my gosh, this is not what we wanted.
Yeah. Well, the very first king, Saul,
Right,
is not like a great king.
shocker.
Right? So
Could have teased that plot line out. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty immediately they get exactly the opposite of what they said that they wanted.
Right. But the transactional nature of humanity is so clearly apparent because it's we want what they have.
Yep.
Even though we don't know what they have. Or even though maybe we know and we know that what they have isn't good. We still have FOMO is the best made up term of all time.
Yeah.
Because it's so true.
Yeah.
The FOMO is real for the Israelites in this moment. Look, I've been looking at them over there, and they look better than us. So clearly that's what we need.
Yeah. It goes back to I will be a faster runner if I buy better shoes.
Right.
No, we won't. Because you're still the same person in the same body, and that's just going to be the way it is. Yeah.
And your responsibility to train gets usurped by your thought that I can do this the easy way.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the best part about all of this is that God keeps reminding that there's no the easy way is to own your responsibility and be guided by God.
Yeah.
But that's not easy.
No.
That's not easy.
It's long-term easier.
Yes.
Short-term harder.
That's right. Short game, messy. Long game, great.
But how often do we not choose the hard thing in the immediate?
Yeah.
In the hopes that it will just go away.
Right. Yes. I would love for a lot of things to go away. Well, and it's talk about being. If you are looking around the world, and I find myself guilty of this all the time. I look around the world. The Israelites are looking around the world and realizing that their path is different from those paths over there. Mm-hmm. It is hard to maintain when yours is the different path, even if because you are going to be constantly barraged with this other way or this other path. It is very hard to not be transactional in a transactional world.
Yeah.
It wears you down. It wears you down over time. And guess what? God is not a living human being standing next to me, coaching me onward. Sometimes I can't hear God's voice because I've chosen not to listen in the right ways, obviously. Yeah. But God's not a lightning bolt sign that's super obvious. So
sometimes God is, and we still ignore it. I mean, Samuel
that's very
literally lays out exactly what's going to happen.
Very true.
He gives you the exact consequences that you're going to have. Everybody said, "Yeah, I hear you, but I don't think you're wrong," and they moved on. It's like it's more just our desire not to hear the hard words that.
Right.
That makes me think of we have said no cell phones in our house until high school. My daughter has a watch that she can call us on, so it's not like. The safety is there.
Right.
Without the internet being in her hand. She, is coming home every night and Sharia got a phone. Mm-hmm. And then, or the next night she'll be like, well, Narali has a phone. So she'll be naming the kids in her class, oh, they have a phone. And last night she came home and she was like, can you believe this? Charlie, who's one of her good friends in the class, isn't getting a phone until he's 18, and then it's going to be a flip phone. And I was like,
and there you
go. See, you're not the only one.
But it's a hard, again, it's the counterculture. The countercultural is hard. And it becomes incredibly hard to be sustainable in a world that is what our world is.
Yeah.
Usually the good work is the harder work.
Yeah. So what's your takeaway today, Catherine?
God is the ultimate parent, and I should probably pay a little bit more attention to that. But I don't. It's funny. It's both disheartening and reassuring to know that it's a weird dichotomy of disheartening and reassuring to know that humanity has been so broken for so long, and yet God is still sticking in. If there is never a better time to recognize God's stick-to-itiveness.
Yeah.
It is to move through the Old Testament and hear the echoes of how similar it is to where we currently are and be like, wow, I would have walked away a long time ago and been like, forget y'all, good Lord, you're unteachable.
Yeah.
So there is nothing more steady, and the consistency of God is quite reassuring in all of this.
I think that's it for me too, is to some extent, it's like, we have original sin is a thing. I think what it is for me is like, I've been on this journey of reclaiming the orthodoxy of faith, like reclaiming some of these ancient theological things that we've sort of in the modern era threw aside as being parochial or too old or whatever. And the idea of things like original sin and the depravity of humanity and the brokenness of our hearts and the steadfastness of God and the perseverance of the saints and all of these things that I was taught in seminary and rejected as being old-fashioned. How much God has been challenging me lately to see the truth maybe in a different light, maybe in a different way than I was taught, but see the inherent truth that they're recognizing, which is humanity is broken, the world is broken. All of this is downstream consequences of our brokenness. Right. And it doesn't do me any good not to recognize. In fact, it does me more when I recognize the shared brokenness of all of us. And that is a reality of our world. And that is something we're wrestling with. And just because we're experiencing consequences of that brokenness, which we do all the time, doesn't mean God is punishing us. Right? It's not about punishing or an active vengefulness or an active part of God that's like putting these things in our way in order to cause us to have hardships. It's God allowing the consequences, the natural consequences of our sin and our brokenness to play out.
But always giving us the alternative option.
Yes.
If we're just willing to pay attention. Right? There is always another choice.
And when we live into God's grace and we really own that, and when we say to ourselves, every day is a new day. I'm being forgiven every day for what I did yesterday. Right. Then that allows us to live into the grace and to choose something different than what our sin would tell us to choose. Right. Yeah.
And then when you actually embrace that, at least for me, when I actually embrace forgiveness and grace, then I increase my capacity to serve and to love and to hear God. Yeah. Because when I'm broken, I got nothing to give, you know?
Yeah. All right, so next week we are with our friend Ezra. So we're moving forward in time to post-exile. Ezra's a bookmark is a companion to Nehemiah when we started this series. Ezra is looking back at the history of Israel and how they have ended up where they are.
Just as we are doing, right?
Yeah. So we're going to be talking a little bit about how the past and the present relate. And how we have to move. Time is always moving on forward. And sort of the danger of trying to recreate our past.
Ooh. And that's hitting at a button for a lot of folks.
You know what? I always go the easy route, Catherine.
Always.
My husband asked me that one time. It's like at some point, do you just want to like pick an easy sermon series?
Absolutely not.
No. This is what I'm struggling with. So you're coming along with me on a ride. So next week we're in Ezra 3. So we'll see you next week.
Bye.
These podcasts will always be free. However, if you find them meaningful and would like to consider supporting our online outreach, you can donate using the link in the description or at wakeforestpres.org.